Why I won't use Next.js, but here's the deal. After we get done reading why I won't use Next.js, we're going to hop on over and read why I'm using Next.js, a response to this article from Lee Robb himself. So we got Kent C. Dodds and Lee Robb battling it out in the texts over React, a library that's a framework that became a meta framework because the only way to use it is that you have to have your entire system infected by it. So it's a great fight. Everybody get ready. There will only be one winner, and that winner, of course, will be Intel or AMD because they have to produce faster CPUs, so therefore you can be able to run Slack, that chat program that takes up somehow an entire core and several gigabytes of memory because JavaScript is so fantastic, okay? So that's the real winner here, okay? The rest of you are losers. You've got a new project to work on, or you've got an existing project you're motivated to upgrade to a more modern approach. Or perhaps you're dissatisfied with your current modern framework or second-guessing yourself and you're interested in investigating alternatives. In any case, you've got a decision to make. There's a lot of modern frameworks to choose from. Even if you're not facing this choice right now, you may be trying to decide which framework to invest time learning to make yourself more marketable and productive in the future. Okay. I had been using Remix since it was first released in 2020. Didn't he also create Remix? Isn't that a more better? I loved it so much I joined the company for 10 months to help the community, to help get the community going, and now I recommend and teach Remix on epicweb.dev. Oh, okay. So he didn't actually just start it. He was just a DevRel. Okay, I didn't realize that. Remix is a full-stack web framework and strives to solve problems faced by people building web applications, much like Next.js. As Next.js is a very popular alternative to Remix, people ask me why I choose Remix instead of Next.js for the framework I teach on epicweb.dev. You should have made these little links, so I can click them. These people are probably facing one of these scenarios I mentioned. So this post is for those people, okay? I like to focus my time and attention. By the way, Kent is also a very, 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 nice guy. So he's not going to say, this article will just not be negative, right? It's just going to point out the things that he likes about Remix. And, that's pretty much what you're going to see here. At least that's what I'm going to take. Let's see. So I'd much rather write a post titled Why I Use Remix and written about the things I love about Remix. I've already done this. But a lot of people ask me specifically about Next.js, and this post is for them. I'm not here to bash on Next.js. I'm here to add my honest take of my personal perception and experience with Next.js. If you'd rather not hear negative things about Next.js, then I invite you to stop reading now, go outside, and touch some grass. Everybody, go touch a little bit of grass, okay? Just go touch a little grass right now, okay? Get it out of your system, touch it, feel it, experience it, get the hell back in. All right, before I go on, I need to acknowledge the fact that you're reading this on a site that's built with Next.js. You can check in the browser console and find the global Next data variable rather than the Remix context one. This is because Epic Web Dev is built by a team that has been building software with Next.js for years, and they make their own decisions. I can respect that. I think this actually highlights a character by Kent. And what I mean by that is that this is obviously his stuff as epicweb.dev, and he obviously has contracted out epicweb.dev to be built by some group of people. And they're going to use something that he would not use. And he was totally okay with that. I think there's something that's very honest and good about seeing this, that he is probably somebody that long as you build a good piece of software at the end of the day, he doesn't care what's going on. And he's not going to just make it so that this also has to be built in a technology that people aren't as familiar with because it's his way. So I can respect that. This actually gives me an opportunity to make another important point before we get started. Whatever you use is probably fine. Your tool choice makes much less than your skill at using the tool to accomplish your desired outcome. This is such a good point, by the way. This is why JavaScript continues to be such a successful language, is that people have invested all their time into it. And there's this thing that happens that the more you use a tool, the better you are at using that tool. And the better you are at using that tool, the bigger things you can build. It doesn't matter how bad the tool is in the first place. There's just a certain proficiency gain by using the same thing over and over and over again. You know what I mean? And so by simply using it over and over again, you're just better. And so, of course, it keeps on working, right? That's why people like these products so much, is because they already have all this momentum in them. In this post, I'm going to argue for why I won't be using Next.js, because I think Remix is a better tool for creating excellent user experience. But that does not mean you are a failure or a bad person if you're using Next.js. That said, I do think you would be happier and more productive if you used Remix. Otherwise, I wouldn't bother writing this. Finally, I want to mention that I've been an outsider to the Next.js framework for years. It's been a long time since I shipped something with Next.js myself. That said, I keep up with Next.js developments and hear of the experience of others. My past experience gives me the intuition on the approach frameworks take, and I can get a good sense of where a framework doesn't align with my sensibilities. So, with that out of the way, let's get into why I won't use Next.js. This is also pretty classic tech. Right now in tech, you have to preface everything you say so that every last possible argument and person will be happy, or else you'll get very angry tweets on the internet because you didn't address every last person's concern. It's honestly one of the I think one of the worst parts about the internet right now is that people can't just say what they think. They have to preface the universe before they can just say, think about how much time was spent prefacing why what he's saying, he's not meaning that it has to be negative and all that. That's just so much text. You know what I mean? It's just so much text for that, okay? Just say, I don't like it, and here's the reasons why. I've been deploying stuff via HTTP for over a decade. I've dabbled in native development. I call that naive development, but I really found my home on the web. Years ago, I was working in React and became dissatisfied with the de facto standard for testing my React components, Enzyme. To make a long story short, I decided to build a testing library, which is now the recommended testing utility for React and other UI libraries. One of my primary differences between Enzyme and testing library is that with Enzyme gave you a wrapper with a bunch of overly helpful, dangerous utilities for interacting with rendering elements. Testing library gave you the elements themselves. To boil that down to a principle, I would say that instead of wrapping the platform APIs, testing library exposes the platform's APIs. I like this approach in general. This is a very good approach, which is you got to just give people the hooks. You don't, every time you wrap something, you're making an active decision that you maybe don't realize it, maybe it's passive in your case, but you're making a decision that you have to support all underlying changes as well for people to interact with your abstraction. And so by just simply not having that abstraction to begin with, it works. Now, one thing I find that is very useful is providing helper functions. So instead of wrapping it, you just provide a series of helper functions to get stuff. Because that way you just don't have to support it. And this is a reason why Rust is such a cool language. I know, Rust, I brought up Rust somehow, is that by having traits, you can define traits and operations and implement them, and therefore the elements that you're working with can be lifted up into a new level of abstraction without losing the underlying the underlying reference to the element, which I think is honestly one of the greatest reasons why Rust is a good language, is that specific ability to do trait implementations. It's really, really, really nice. The primary benefit to this is transferability. By focusing on a standard APIs, testing library helps people become familiar with those APIs, which helps them in their work elsewhere. And the utilities available in other tools that rely on the standard APIs integrate with testing library without special adapter and vice versa. Exactly. Rust traits are amazing, yeah. So hopefully you guys understand that. It's kind of hard to explain why that's so awesome if you've never used Rust, but this is a perfect example of why Rust can be really, really useful. Every library has its own APIs for things, of course. Testing library has find by role, for example. You need to understand the inputs to that. But the point is that it operates directly on the DOM and returns DOM nodes back to you. Rather than wrapping the APIs, it exposes the APIs to you. It's a balance of usefulness and transferability. Next.js is like Enzyme in this situation, where Next.js has utilities to allow you to interact with the request, headers, cookies, etc. Remix exposes those APIs directly to you through its loaders and actions. In Remix, these functions accept a request and returns a response. If you need to understand how to return JSON with some set of headers, you go to MDN, the de facto standard for web platform documentation, rather than the Remix docs. Okay, so I love this explanation. I truly do love this explanation that they're giving, and it makes me think that Remix actually could be a pretty fun place to kind of play around with if you're going into the meta frameworks. Obviously, I don't know Next.js as well, but it's still this. I mean, I love this explanation because this is what I want to see. This is my favorite thing about the web is when you just use the standards, right? And so when you just use the standards, like the entire corpus of documentation still completely applies for like your stuff as well. You don't have to create this entire separate universe. It's very beautiful. There are many such examples. You get let's see, as you get better with Remix, you get better at the web and vice versa. Okay. So you've been using it for a year and you wouldn't use it any other way. All right. React plus Vite plus HTMX is the way. Don't let these meta frameworks bog you down, Prime. Actually, I know you're making a joke at the end of that, but I actually do think that HTMX is the way. I like Go and HTMX right now. When I transitioned from AngularJS to React, I left a lot of AngularJS behind me. All of the time I invested at getting really good at AngularJS felt like a huge waste. I don't want that to ever happen to me again. I actually don't mind when that happens, right? It just means you're moving on. So I prefer to focus on a framework that can only give me what I want from user experience perspective, but I can also give me the skills that I can use wherever I develop the web. But that's the thing, is that if you use Remix and you use React, you are by definition creating yourself into a hole in which when you change completely, like it completely just change, like you leave everything behind again. Have you ever heard of OpenNext? If not, here's how it describes itself. OpenNext takes Next.js build output and converts it into a package that can be deployed to any functions as a service platform. As of now, only AWS Lambda is supported. While Vercel is great, it's not a good option if all your infrastructure is on AWS. Hosting it in your AWS account makes it easy to integrate with your backend. It's a lot cheaper than Vercel. Next.js, unlike Remix or Astro, doesn't have a way to self-host using serverless. You can run it as a node application. This, however, doesn't work the same way as it does on Vercel. Okay, OpenNext.js exists because Next.js is difficult to deploy anywhere but Vercel. I appreciate the company's incentive to make their own hosting offering as attractive as possible, but it's evident that this incentive has deprioritized making Next.js easy to deploy anywhere. I always just kind of had Next.js as pretty much synonymous with Vercel. That's kind of how I always thought of it in my head, is that if you're using Next.js, you're using Vercel. You're not really using Next.js for something else. But it sounds like they're trying to make that happen. They're trying to make fetch happen, which may be pretty hard to make happen. I've heard from many individuals that hosting Next.js yourself as a regular Node.js application is a huge pain as well. I usually don't take other devs' opinions like this well. I would have to know why. And I know that Netlify team spent a lot of time on getting Next.js support and keeping it up with changes in Next.js. Okay, so their support changes probably are the hardest. We can argue about whether Vercel is right or wrong about their current approach, but the fact remains that if Vercel's pricing or other things become a problem for you, getting off Vercel will also become a problem. It comes down to incentives. Interesting. Hold on, I just realized I don't have music on this entire time. Let's get the music's on. All right, add this to the fact that Vercel is still allegedly not yet profitable. They're a growing company for sure, but I question their unit economics. I don't question their unit economics. They make money on everything they do, right? They're not trying to... I assume if they're not profitable, it's because they've hired more engineers to build more things. But every single time a request is made, they make money, right? So, they always make money. They don't have to first get to X amount of requests before they make money. They make money, right? And that should give you great concern to put all your eggs in that basket. From the beginning, Remix was built to deploy anywhere you can run JavaScript. This is helped in a large part by the emphasis on standards. I definitely appreciate this aspect of Remix. Next.js is eating React. My misgivings of Meta as a company always made me feel a little uneasy about Meta owning React. However, as Vercel has been hiring many of the React team members, this hasn't really helped things for me. Ever since then, the React team has felt much less collaborative. Okay. I know for myself, it seems like Vercel is trying to blur the lines between what is Next.js and what is React. There's a lot of confusion for people on what React and what is Next.js, especially in regard to server components and server action features. Okay. This is actually kind of interesting. I've always kind of, in general, had this problem. I know at some point there's going to be this phrase, which you're going to hear, which is going to be, I learned Next.js before I learned JavaScript. I feel like that's going to happen at some point because I do understand this line blurring, which is, at what point is it Next.js and what point is it React? I think people are really starting to struggle with this. And as a new person, I feel like it does feel vastly complicated. I do feel bad for anyone that's getting started in today's world because I feel like it's only gotten harder and it hasn't gotten any easier. I guess you could say, okay, hold on. We got to quit talking about, okay, so hold on, Daniel. Okay, so you want on the hot stage? We're going to get on the hot stage, buddy. Vercel is literally burning money to help React move to server components. Okay, Daniel, defend that opinion. What makes you think that that investment is burning money? Why do you think it's bad? Because we keep hearing about that. What does that mean, right? To me, I see why they're doing what they're doing. You're on the hot seat now. Okay, literally, a Shopify tried to do this and failed. Okay, that's not a good example. Not to cite DHH, but DHH literally said somebody else tried this and it didn't work is not a good reason not to try something. Like, I need something more, right? I need something more and something real. What I see is that Next.js is positioning itself to be the conduit in which you use server components. That when you think of server components, you think of Next.js. When you think of React, you think of Next.js. That when you build React, which all these projects are using React, you have everyone promoting React. You have every last person leaning into React. And so that means they're going to have this synonymity with React, right, in which they're going to be the first thing that comes to mind, which means that they're going to have the greatest opportunity to be able to take advantage of every last new application, every last new person coming into the ecosystem, which means that they have a huge potential to make even more money. What I see as their moves is an investment into the future. They're literally buying something to make more money. I think it makes completely perfect sense. Like, I see it no other way other than this is a good idea for them. Now, is it a good idea for everybody? I don't know. I love HTMX and not this. So just remember that. My ideas of this is not the same. All right? I would feel more comfortable if React belonged to an open foundation. But short of that, it would be nice, at least if they were more collaborative than they've been since joining Vercel. Anecdotally, they are far less collaborative at Vercel than they were at Meta. Used to reach out and keep me in the loop for years, and then it stopped, and unfortunately the team at Meta rarely has answers. There's definitely a whole movement here. The problem with that is that I like Ryan Florence. It's not about that, but just saying that, one person's experience doesn't mean everything, right? He could have fallen out of limelight with the people on the React side of things, the people getting hired, didn't really know him. The team could change, dynamics could change. Maybe there's other people that they reach out to, right? So like having that as a reason to say that, I don't feel like is a very great way to. Anyways, I guess you could say that at this point in favor of Next.js because at least they're reaping the benefits of closer collaboration with React. But in my experience, a team not being collaborative is a bad sign for their software. Again, I don't know if you can say that concretely. I'd have to understand that more. Update: Matt Carroll, developer advocate on React team, reached out to me at the same time I published this post. So that's a good sign. Experimenting on my users. Wow. I'm highly concerned by some questionable decisions made by Next.js team, primarily in the marketing of experimental features as stable. Features that Next.js is shipping as stable are in the Canary release of React. Honestly, it's pretty funny and also sad. Okay, this is a spicy take. Do you know what a canary refers to? It refers to a sentient species which are used to detect risks to humans by providing advanced warnings of danger. Yes, that's because canaries are they're very sensitive and they would like pass out and fall over. So Next.js is building into itself a canary feature, calling it stable, then sending it off to all users, effectively turning your app into a sentient species. You may not see it this way, but maybe it's just a messaging problem. But I've heard a lot of people who have tried that their experience with Next.js app router has been far from positive and think it's largely because of its incompleteness. They are the canaries. Okay, fair. I mean, app router was the recommended new way of doing things, but I've heard a lot of, I know that there's been a lot of grumblings. Fair. Are also used by Meta. Basically, it's close to production. That's why teams are using it at Meta. If you don't like it, it's not like they're forcing you. Yeah, they're not forcing you, so I don't really like that argument. Typically, I think Ken's arguments are really good. I don't think this argument's very good at all. And while some people report having a great time with App Router, I'm convinced that a lot of their enjoyment is coming from dropping the weight of Pages directory and getting a nested routing feature, not necessarily these canary features. Yeah, that's fair. Yes, React server components are very cool, and I look forward to being able to use them when they're production ready. They'll allow Remix to offload a lot of work. Too much magic. Have you heard the principle of least surprise? It states a component of a system should behave in a way that most users will expect it to behave, and therefore not astonish or surprise the users. Okay. This bit could probably exist under the web platform heading, because the best way to avoid surprising people is by following the web platform APIs as well as possible and reducing the amount of magic your software does on top of that. I know, but Remix in itself is still a lot of magic, right? All these frameworks, all these meta frameworks, even React itself is a ton of magic. You know what I mean? Like, there is a ton of magic going on. And so I feel like this argument also just falls over on its head because you're using You're using something that's a non-JavaScript standard that's being compiled from the non-JavaScript standard into JavaScript, then executed in a library which hooks into all of these little items, does some sort of virtual diffing using server components to send down fractions of what should be executed. You have this whole server that's executing some amount of React, and you have a whole client that's executing some amount of React. We're going to be having these form actions in which actually wrap this function, put it on the server, have some magic RPC. I hope caching works, right? Like, the amount of magic that's actually inside of these JavaScript things is astonishing. And so anyone saying that this is just like, hey, you should be as close to the API as possible, it's just like, if you're using React, you've already long since given up this argument on magic, right? Debugging magic is hard. Debugging React can be very difficult. That's why React Dev Tools exists, because there's an entire debugging that has to happen that can only be done by not even a debugger, right? It's not even a debugger at all. You just need an orthogonal view into what you've built such that you can debug it. We can have React without JSX. I know, but that's a stupid answer. Okay? Who are these people using React without JSX, right? Nobody does that, right? I understand you can because it transpiles, right? You can also have JavaScript without TypeScript. Again, would you want to do that? I wouldn't want to do that. Okay, I don't want to do that. My company use Next.js and React Native because it is easy to hire React developers, because I had experience with React with the web, and now I work on the app. The transition was smooth. Okay, interesting. Again, I think DHH is wrong on this one. I love types. So I'm just saying that this notion that that magic is no good, I don't find this argument very compelling. All right. Next.js violates this principle in many ways. One example of the decision to override global fetch function to automatically add to automatic caching. To me, this is a huge red flag. It's decisions like this that I want to make me pause and wonder what else they're doing by surprise if they decided to adopt Next.js. I'm actually less upset about this one. I think that they did it right, because here's the deal. When you make an HTTP request on the web, it caches it for you. I think making fetch act more like your browser is a good thing, and that you should truly, you should want caching to happen. And maybe it's fair to say, hey, there's something called cached fetch, which does caching, and then you can still use fetch, which doesn't do any caching, is the raw dog version. But if you want it to be cached, wrap fetch with this operator, cache, and it does it for you. That's fair. That's fair. You can imagine, you can enable it via HTTP if you want. It's not magic. Yeah, but does fetch respect HTTP caching? It does on the web, because the web has an entire thing, but I don't think fetch does. Fetch has no caching built into it. So even though you enable it via HTTP headers, you don't actually get caching. I assume this is how fetch works. That fetch, if there is HTTP headers with caching, then it properly does it. I'd be surprised if they do some other thing, then I'd be a little bit more skeptical. You know what I mean? At that point, if they did caching at a unique way, then I'd be a little bit more skeptical. All right. Most of us learned from MooTools days that overriding built-in features of the platform leads to problems. It's the reason we have string prototype includes instead of string prototype contains. Really? Did we just get a MooTools reference? Is that why they call it includes? I literally, every single time I use includes, I first type in contains. Every time. Every single effing time I type in contains, and then I have to go back and do includes. Is this really why? That mother effing MooTools? You son of a bitch. I cannot believe this. Doing this has negative impacts on the future of web platform, and it also means that that when you go to debug why something isn't working, you have to sift through the resources available to find the Next.js version of fetch versus the web platform version of fetch. Yeah, that can be. I can understand why this is negative. I think fetch should have basic HTTP caching available, which makes sense to me. Complexity. I keep hearing from people they're finding Next.js is getting overly complex. This factors into too much magic a bit as well. React has server actions as well as the new experimental taint API, which has become the subject of many jokes. How dare you name an API after a body part in which many jokes are made, okay? They should have just called it the Gooch API. Let's see. I'm excited about the perspective of React adding built-in support for mutations, but I'm definitely concerned about them changing semantics of how the web forms work. Each of these things increase the level of complexity. I really appreciate that Remix team is led by people who share my principles and will ensure once these types of features are included, they don't go down the same road of added complexity. In fact, the Remix team is committed to reduce overall API footprint in the future rather than increase it. This leads me to my next point. I mean, I do like this. The less API you have to think about, almost always and exclusively the better, right? This is Kent's article, yes. Stability. Next.js is on version 13. React Router, built by the same team as Remix, has been around much longer and is only on version 6. Remix was on version 1 for almost 2 years and only 1 month ago hit version 2. It's famously the most boring major version bump of a web framework ever, thanks to Remix team's emphasis on stability. Earlier this year, the Remix team shared their plans for getting a version 2 feature released as an opt-in part of version 1 using a strategy called future flags. This played out extremely well, and a huge number of actively developed Remix apps were upgraded in less than a day. App Router is less complicated. What? I think in general, people are very confused by App Router. There seems to be a lot of angst and internet anger around App Router. I haven't used it enough to have a strong opinion. Next, the Remix team cares a great deal about stability. This is why they didn't jump on the bandwagon years ago and implement support for React server components, even though everyone was asking them to. This is also why there has effectively been only a single breaking change in 8 years of React Router. This kind of stability has major impact. So one thing I do want to say, that one thing I don't like about React Router is that it like neuters the URL. The URL, I mean, this has always been most my problem with any of these routing features to begin with, is that they break where state should have always been, which is the URL. We should have driven more state to the URL and made things more considerate of that. But it feels like React Router, at least for a long time, just completely destroyed query params and things like that. So I'm not fully convinced that React Router is also treating the web and the web standards and the web API as a great thing, right? They're changing some of the semantics that could have been a lot better. This kind of stability has a major impact on me and the apps I've built. There are some libraries that I'm always terrified to upgrade because of the history of hours of confusion as I try to update all my code to adapt to the new version. For something as impactful as the web framework, I would prefer not to have that feeling. Remix has been a gift in this regard. Okay. The only thing, let's see, is this thing really a course for $1,000? Wait, what? Capability. You may have expected this blog post to be a comparison of features and capabilities of Next.js versus other frameworks like Remix, but the fact is that you can build awesome things with both frameworks. I want to point out that features matter less than capabilities. Aren't features capabilities? I'm a bit confused by that statement. Features are capabilities, right? I feel like we're semantically dancing around things. I personally feel like the pit of success with Remix is wider than with Next.js, but I'm not going to go to great pains to describe why. A lot of this stuff is pretty subjective anyways. When Remix, a team rewrote the Next.js e-commerce demo to answer the Remix versus Next.js question, it demonstrated really well that Remix resulted in a better user experience with much less code, which is an important input to user experience. Since then, Next.js has updated it to use the app router, which they are calling stable, but relies on canary features, as I've already mentioned. So I think it's worth making another comparison. Remix has also learned some new tricks since that article was written, like out-of-order streaming. Conclusion. You may agree or disagree with the things I've said. You may think it's been unfair. You may wish that I had said more or less. That's your prerogative. Prerogative. Wow. Okay. I knew that word, prerogative. And I welcome you to share your opinions on my take on X, YouTube, Twitch, etc. This is post-prefacing, again, the curse of the modern tech article world, that you must preface all things and then post-preface things on the other side. Lee Robinson, VP of DX at Vercel, posted a thoughtful response to his blog. You may be interested in reading. It doesn't satisfy my concerns personally, though. I just wanted to share why I'm recommending and teaching Remix instead of Next.js. So next time someone asks me, I can simply point them to this article. In short, the answer is I feel like both are highly capable frameworks, but Remix aligns better with my own sensibilities on what makes software maintainable and a joy to work with long term. I also feel like between the two frameworks, you'll walk away from epicweb.dev with more transferable knowledge than if I taught Next.js. Okay. In summer of 2023, I hosted an 8-week-long live presentation of Epic Web Workshop Series. Gwen Shapiro, one of the attendees, told me months later, I'm now building mostly on Next.js stack, and I feel like your class gave me the mental framework I needed to ramp up and feel competent. Foundations are everything. I bet you could probably say the inverse as well. I bet if somebody really went deep on Next.js and then went to Remix, they could probably ramp up really quickly as well. I just don't believe Like, I don't take this as a good argument for or against. So whether you're using Next.js or plan to stay, or you're hoping to adopt Remix, or even if you'd like to use some other web framework, my hope is that you're choosing to, by choosing to teach Remix, I've equipped you to take on any challenge you face on the full stack web. Because at the end of the day, I just want to make the world a better place by teaching you how to build quality software. Fair take. Thanks, Kent. I'm probably about 50% on this article for agreeing. Do you know what I mean? About 50%. The thing I really like about this article is that it points out that how important it is to have web standards. And it's something that sometimes I fail to do, which is just make sure that everything you do really follows those standards and exposes those standards well. Because if you don't, you're just going to be, you're really just like, you're just digging yourself a hole of maintenance. But the magic part, I have a really hard time with. Because honestly, React is effing magic. As I said, the response, why am I using Next.js? So this is from Lee. Kenzie Dodds recently published a new article, Why I Won't Use Next.js. In this post, Kent shares his opinions on why he's recommending using Remix instead of Next.js. I wanted to share my thoughts and makes a case that learning Next.js helps you learn the web platform. All Next.js features work self-hosted. Server components and server actions are independent of Vercel. The React Canary channel is stable for frameworks like Next.js to adopt. Server components are production ready. Okay, background. Kent is a prolific educator and previously a co-founder of Remix. Okay, so I thought he was, you just told me he was a DevRel, and now there's more to the story? His new course, Epic Web Dev, helps you learn how to build full-stack web applications using Remix. Kent is an incredible member of the React community. I've learned a lot from him over the years, especially his material on testing. And this blog actually uses a library he created, MX Bundler. So thank you. Look, it's Kent. So if you're new here, I'm Lee. I work at Next.js. I like Lee a whole bunch. I didn't get to see him this last week, which made me sad. Good guy. I like Lee a lot. I've worked on Next.js. I've also made some courses about using Next before I joined Vercel. Both Kent and I are passionate about the tools that we use, as Kent shares in his post. As Next.js is a very popular alternative to Remix, people ask me why I choose Remix instead of Next.js for a framework I teach on epicweb.dev. These people are probably facing one of these scenarios I mentioned, so this post is for those people. Similarly, I'm often asked about my opinions on Next.js versus other frameworks. This post is for folks in the Next.js community who are wondering about some of the points Kent brings up. The web platform. First, it is important to call out that Remix has pushed the React community forward in its understanding of the web platform and web APIs. Next.js 1 was released in 2016. We just had a 7-year anniversary, and at that time, the Node.js request response objects were the de facto way to build a server-rendered JavaScript framework. We were writing React class components as well. A huge portion of TVUI at Netflix is class components still. That's just that. Is that a whole bunch. Like, legacy lasts a long time. Decisions made at one point in time will last for so long, right? Remix 1 was released in 2021. A lot has changed since then. The web platform is more powerful than ever, and there's an entire new generation of developers learning the web request and response APIs first instead. They are able to learn once and write the same JavaScript everywhere, reusing existing knowledge. I love that. This is actually a really astute and great point, which is Remix did benefit. I didn't realize Remix is as new as it was, but Remix greatly benefits. Does everybody remember, what do they call it, the Kennedy model? Does everybody remember the Kennedy model of Node.js? The Kennedy model effectively went like this: request, response, next. And you had to do your stuff and then call the next function. If you didn't call the next function and returned something, then that's what would go to the next one. It was not great. It was just not. I didn't love it. Let's see. Where Next.js has utilities to allow you to interact with the request headers, cookies, etc., Remix exposes those APIs directly to you through its loader and actions. In Remix, these functions accept request and returns a response. If you need to understand how return JSON with some headers, go to MDN. Okay, yes, this is absolutely true for Next.js pages router. However, a lot has changed since then. Let me explain. I thought they were getting rid of the pages and going with the app router. Interesting. That's middleware like everywhere. I know. It's middleware like everywhere. So it acts like middleware, but only applying to the responses. Yes. The Next.js pages router was introduced in 2016, and you'll notice that many parts of the framework that feel closer to Node.js than the web APIs. For example, you've been able to eject from the default Next.js server to have your own Express server since the beginning. Okay. This design choice continued for many years. Next.js 9, released in 2019, introduced API routes. These endpoints built on Node.js request and response APIs, and the API is similar to Express, as many folks were familiar with the APIs at the time. Okay. I didn't know JFK invented that. He did. Yeah. Absolutely. Wait, they're getting rid of page routing? Well, I don't think that. I think they're now pointing everyone to app routing as like where you should start, as opposed to page router. API routes in the ejected server still work today, but frameworks must evolve over time based on community feedback, how the ecosystem moves, and new functionality available in the web platform. That's why Next.js 12, released in 2021, introduces middleware, which was built on the web request response and fetch. That didn't make sense to build new APIs that weren't embracing the now standardized web APIs. Note, this was the same year Remix version 1 was released. We agree. App router. All right, let's see. I mentioned evolution, right? Kent mentions this in his post. Totally fair. Let's see, I've been an outsider for the Next frameworks. It's been a long time since I've shipped something on Next.js myself. Totally fair. There's only so many hours in the day for family, work, and fun. So I don't expect Kent, or really anyone, to have kept up with the chronology of Next.js here like I have. But let me explain further about where we're headed. After 6 years of feedback, Next.js 13 introduced a new foundation for the framework with the app router. The pages router didn't go anywhere, but again, the framework must evolve with the times. If you were designing a new framework, how would you handle reading values from the incoming request, like cookies or headers? How do you allow developers to write custom API endpoints? Well, the standard for web APIs, of course, going back to Kent's feedback. Okay, so he is like directly saying we do too. Do all this. Again, definitely true for pages router. Inside get server-side props, the equivalent for the Remix loader, you can't use web APIs to access headers or cookies. It's Node API still. Okay. So you're designing this framework. You want to use web standard APIs, and so you also want to make it easy for developers to do the right thing, Ken says. Okay. I mean, I like this article so far. This is actually a really good response. To boil that down to a principle, I would say instead of wrapping the platform APIs, testing library expose the platform APIs. We agree, but why couldn't we have both? In the Next.js app router, let's say you want to create an arbitrary API endpoint. These are now called route handlers. This is what they look like. All right. I mean, that looks like the request response APIs. Route handles accept a web request and produces a response. But what about cookies, headers, and more? Since you have access to the web APIs directly, you can browse MDN and reuse all of the knowledge you've learned from Next.js. Also, ChatGPT is really good at creating those APIs. Nice. Where's semicolon? Where the hell's the semicolons? Oh my goodness. Look at this. No semicolons. Only semicolons. Inconsistent. Didn't even use prettier. We can also provide abstractions that can be composed by allowing you to write reusable functions without having to pass headers as a function parameter. You can choose whichever you prefer. This is kind of weird looking. Just because the request is here, these are right here. How do these get that? You know what I mean? Like, this must be a typo. This is a typo, right? Because this feels massively magic, right? Because, like, how are you just grabbing the cookies? Oh, it does work that way. Okay, so I dislike that. Obviously, I feel like cookies, you should pass in the request that you want to grab the cookies off of, right? You should pass in the request to get the cookies or the headers. Bada bing, bada boom, it works. I feel uncomfortable about that because what's the current active request? Like, how do you know that it's the current active request? Is there things I have to understand about awaiting? Why does he have an async function, yet nothing in here awaits? Do you not know how much performance issues that causes with Node? The cookies function returns the same underlying value headers, a web API. It can be used in both route handlers as well as the server-side code and app router, like server-side actions or server components. You don't understand. There's no cookies on the request because I ate them. Thanks, TJ, for that insightful thing that I just read out loud. I appreciate that. I strongly agree with Kent. I can't imagine a new frameworks being released that don't embrace the web APIs. That's why Remix, FeltKit, Nuxt, Solid, Astro, Next.js, and many more are doing this. I really do. I'm like hot and bothered by this. Honestly, I am hot and bothered by this, that you can set cookies and you don't even know what request or anything you're setting it on. All right? That it actually hot and bothers me. I strongly agree. Let's see, hold on. Independence. Ken mentions a project called OpenNext, which quoted the post. Yep, we remember this one. You support on AWS. As maintainers of OpenNext are building a platform for easily deploying serverless applications on AWS, I would argue this package is trying to be an open source infrastructure as a code tool, not open source framework. Naming is hard. Ken says OpenNext exists because Next.js is difficult to deploy. All right, remember that? We were always looking to improve self-hosting Next.js. For example, I made a video and an example showing how to deploy with Docker to whatever service you prefer. All right, next start is how Walmart, TikTok, ChatGPT, Starbucks, Target, DoorDash, and many others self-host Next.js. Now you might be thinking, but Lee, that's not what Kent is talking about. He's talking about serverless platform. Why wouldn't Next.js build first-party adapters for every deployment target? That sounds very hard. By the way, that is TJ's stream. If anyone's wondering, TJ does stream right here. Open source and framework boundaries. Developers don't want walled gardens. They want freedom to eject and self-host. It's about control. This is why Next.js features work self-hosted. Vercel provides infrastructures and workflow on top of Next.js. You can host Next.js anywhere you want. I'm a fan of the model of Next.js uses. It's clear how it's funded through Vercel, and the incentives are aligned. I want to deploy Next.js at some point. Maybe I'll try Vercel. It's a similar story for Svelte. You want to deploy Svelte Kit? Maybe try Vercel. Yep, I think it's a great model, right? I think they're doing a great model. Vercel, the maintainers of Next.js who invest heavily in the research and development, are focused on maintaining and building the default deployment output for Next.js. We aren't doing adapters, although I love this for other frameworks. That's fair. I wouldn't do adapters. It seems counterintuitive to do adapters because now you're also maintaining a huge set of stuff. Like, not only are you doing it for your platform, you are now creating a huge amount of adapters for other platforms where you get nothing out of it. Right? I agree with this. Next.js has over 85,000 monthly active developers, and those developers expect things to work well. I have bugs fixed quickly for new features to be released for us to respond to their questions in a timely manner. Let's see, I keep hearing how Next.js, hosting Next.js yourself as a node application is a huge pain, and I have no idea where this is coming from. What is difficult? Containerize it? Create a deploy pipeline? If you said yes to either, then you likely have trouble hosting any app yourself. Ooh, Vic. Oh my goodness, the burn victim Vic. I did mean I somehow do it. Let's see. Did I somehow do it wrong? I have containerized Next.js apps running on prod for 5 years. Dude, he just skill issued harder than I've seen anyone skill issue in my entire lifetime. This is the strongest case for skill issues I've ever seen. We want to default a build output of Next.js to work well when self-hosting and also on Vercel. And guess what? They are the same output. Well, almost. Let me clarify. It took us a while at Vercel to figure out the correct format and boundary between open source framework and infrastructure platform. Our philosophy is called framework-defined infrastructure. And critically, the specification that Vercel uses for frameworks is open source. It's called Build Output API. This output powers Next.js as well as Remix, FeltKit, and many other frameworks on Vercel. We actually maintain our own Remix adapter too, which transforms the Remix output into this format, plus some other features. We'll soon be making the default output of Next.js match the Build Output API directly without some intermediate step. We agree with the importance of keeping these pieces open and accessible, which is why even source the intermediate step. All right. Very cool. All right. I like that. Okay. This is actually the part that we even argued about earlier. Pricing, correlation versus causation. I like this. Kent mentions, we can argue about whether Vercel is right or wrong about their current approach, but the fact remains Vercel's pricing or other things become a problem for you. Getting off Vercel will also be a problem. Okay. There are improvements I'd like to make to Vercel's pricing. Let's see, and we'll have some updates soon. Some pricing changes have already rolled out, like lower prices for our storage products and spend controls. But I understand the sentiment. Unfortunately, the sentiment does not equal causation. Only exposing a full route refresh seems like a ploy on Vercel's part needlessly to re-render server components, increase compute, dollars. I worry about that a bit with Next.js actually. The Next.js technical approaches may optimize for their profit when deployed there. So, I mean, to be completely fair, if you're using React, just that, on the server to render things, like, you have to understand that you aren't going for, like, some thin compute cost layer, okay? You're just not going for a thin compute cost at all, like, at all. And so it's kind of, you're already fighting from, like, a very negative point, Like a very, 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 very negative point. Next.js is easy to run anywhere. This is not true. I'm getting tired of people continuing to claim this. It dismisses the tedious work that OpenNext community is doing, well, is doing to actually make it feasible to run it correctly outside of Vercel. Yet another example. So this is, okay, so we're actually having two different things we're arguing right here. With server actions, you no longer handwrite API endpoints, which means you don't have the ability to explicitly control versioning. From Vercel's point of view, this isn't a big deal because of their infra every deployed version of your app can stick around forever, and requests to old clients get routed to the right version. Absolutely. This is only solved because of serverless functions which scale to 0. They solve the problem by a specific infrastructure solution, yet every demo of look how easy it is for Next.js to host is always some simplified Docker deployment that glosses over details like this. Okay, so this is very true. What Dax is saying is very true, but it's argued from two different versions, right? Anytime you're not using some amazing infrastructure that hides versioning of these little endpoints, no matter what, you're going to run into this problem, right? Netflix, which is not Next.js, which is none of these things, even back in our Groovy days, we still had to have endpoints tied to UI versions, and we had to have a way to load in these endpoints based on UI versions. Like, this is a real thing which always happens because those UIs could live on for years back in the day. So, like, is this a fair critique? I don't think this is a totally fair critique by Dax on this one, which is this problem exists everywhere. This is one of the benefits of Vercel, which is they solve this problem for you. If you wish to self-host it, you absolutely can, but then you incur all the problems of self-hosting, which includes this one problem. Does that make sense? And this is a hard problem. This is why you see APIs like get video list 2 or get video list 3, is because you eventually have to change the APIs, but you can't actually change them because all these old endpoints exist. The exact same thing happens if you're doing anything with mobile, right? Mobile, like, they may not necessarily upgrade, so you have to keep things around for a long time, right? So, is it completely fair? I don't think it's completely fair. I think it's just, that's the reality of trying to have versioned endpoints. It's impossible. I start my API with get video list 13 so that people think I spent a lot of time on the version. Nice. I like this. It's the other way around. Next.js has written their entire framework under the technical direction and vision from the React team, including changing some APIs to something less Next specific. We care a lot about this kind of stuff and getting it right. While Vercel obviously has incentives to take best advantage of React's abilities and architectural model, the idea of designing the worst API so that Vercel could make profit sounds both repulsive and short-sighted. I can vouch for everyone involved in the app router design. Yeah, I'd agree. Like, whenever someone does this kind of thing where they're trying to do it to make money, it's just like, I don't really believe that. I feel like this isn't a great look. If you want to self-host all Next.js features to work, also, hold on, I just got to click this. How do I click this link? 200 people saw this. Yeah, does it really warrant much response in all this? Probably not. There's not like a lot. There's like not a lot that you have to really... Does anyone really care? Anyways, if you want to self-host, all Next.js features will work. So why would someone choose Vercel for Next.js then? The same reason they'd choose Astro, SvelteKit, or even Remix. If you don't worry about infrastructure, Vercel takes care of that for you, plus some other stuff, but that's besides the point. And thanks to framework-defined infra, you're not writing a bunch of CDK code or bespoke infra as code solutions. You're writing Next.js code that's open and portable to any server on any platform. Yes, Next.js is like Kubernetes, and Vercel is like Google Kubernetes Engine. All right, Kent mentions, I know for myself, it seems like Vercel is trying to blur the lines between what is Next.js and what is React. Okay, remember that. Definitely not intentional. Next.js is placing a large bet on the future of React. The app router builds, they're also placing a bet on Svelte. Smart of them, by the way. The app router builds on many features the React team has been working on for years. Building and supporting framework requires a non-trivial amount of work. Redwood is doing the same. In retrospect, we could have worked more closely with Meta team on making some docs changes directly on the React docs versus Next.js docs. Thankfully, this has picked up a lot where we're actively collaborating with the team at Meta. Shout out to Meta's learning and advocacy team. Okay, cool. You know, me personally, I'm kind of over reading about all of this. I think we kind of got more than we need. Is the taint going to be mentioned? Let's go to this. Let's go to this Too Magical. I actually want to hear about this for a quick second. Kent talks about how he's not a fan of Next.js extending the web's fetch API. I agree with a part of this, specifically on adding Next.js specific extensions to fetch API. We're looking to move away from this direction based on community feedback. Next.js 14, for example, if you want to opt out of caching, you'd use no store versus cache no store on the fetch. And if you want to use more programmatic caching and revalidating features, those will soon standalone APIs as well. I could actually agree with Kent's take on this one. You know, going back to it, I think it is good to have a separate API for different behavior. I can fully buy on this one. All right, App Router is a very different model from Pages Router. It's almost like a new framework. This is one of the many reasons why we need to ensure we could incrementally adopt the new router, and the existing router and foundations would be stable and maintained for many releases. We also just created a new free course to teach the model. Then Kent goes on to mention Next.js version 13, React Router built the same team, has been around for much longer, and is only version 6. Remix was on version 1 almost 2 years and now is on version 2. I don't think the number of major versions correlates with whether a framework is stable or not, especially when we've tried to take great care in publishing code mods and upgrade guides when moving between versions. I actually completely agree with this. Saying that you're on version 2 means nothing to me. Honestly, it really doesn't mean a lot. I'm about 70% agreeing with Kent. Anyways, I'm fully agreeing that it is a silly argument to make. That's like, oh, well, Next.js has more versions. How does HTMX respond to the taint? There's no taint. All right, I'm going to go all the way down to the conclusion. Well, that turned out to be a long one. As Kent mentions, I feel like both are highly capable frameworks. We agree. You can make great web experiences with both. While I spent most of the post referencing points from Kent, I'd like to end with the general reasons why I love using Next.js. I never write separate backends for projects I want to create. I can build my entire project with Next.js. I never worry about a bundler, compiler, or front-end infrastructure. I get to focus on making great products through React components, and I'm able to use the latest React features, which I personally have a great developer experience. I'm able to update to the latest version of Next.js and things continue to improve. Performance gets faster and new features get added, and the iteration velocity is high. If there is changes, code mods and upgrade guides are provided. Next.js provides a bunch of components that help me make my site fast. Images, fonts, scripts, and now even properly loading third parties. Yep. I think the images thing is very compelling. This is really, really nice, by the way. For those that don't know, that's fantastic. It's effectively just a way for you to be able to get all the different sizing of images and the nice caching and all that built into your site, as opposed to you trying to handle, store, and use your images. I actually think it's really, really nice. Images are very nice. Yeah, I think it's great. I think they did a great job with that. At the end of the day, you've missed me, Bertrand. Well, I've missed you too. So at the end of the day, here's my take on all of this. Is you should like and subscribe to the channel, absolutely. But the problem with both of these arguments, and really what I see is that they're both also these huge, huge frameworks in which you're doing something a specific way. You get a lot of benefits doing this way, and I can totally see why people want to use these. I worry about new people that you just don't learn how the web works. You learn how Next.js works, or you learn how Remix works. You don't actually know at the end of the day how anything works because you just haven't done anything yourself. Again and again, I've just enjoyed HTMX a bunch because it just allows me to separate these things out. It allows me to have my server as the source of truth and my client as something that responds to the server. I just personally think that is superior, right? In a lot of ways. At the end of the day, add client-side interactivity isn't hard. Throw in a little component, throw in a little bit of JavaScript, easy to execute. You can listen to all events. You can do whatever you want to do. It's not a big deal. But nonetheless, do I think Next.js or Remix are great? I mean, I think they're great. I can't believe how good they've made things. I think the image stuff by Next.js is incredible. The font stuff is incredible. There's a lot of really good things. But at the end of the day, I don't want to keep writing JavaScript all the days. You know what I mean? I actually want to be able to invest in languages that are good at a specific activity. Like JavaScript is great at manipulating the DOM. Go is great on doing stuff with servers. Rust is great on doing stuff with servers. It's kind of like I want to use languages for what I want to, like, for specific use cases that I think are better. And so that's why I'm just going to continue to love HTMX, is because I want that. So there you go. That's it. That's all I have to say. At the end of the day, neither of these two things really concern me because I'm just not going to be probably using either of them to build my little things. But maybe at one day I'll try Next.js and build a project with it. Who knows? The name is the Primogen.